applicable.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's more applicable to high school, but as all of you know, you're going to have incoming freshmen, so it's going to make sense to see some of the trends on the high school level as well. Um, so these are just some basic why tobacco use is important. So a lot of adults who have ever smoked or are reporting smoking daily tried their first cigarette or started smoking at the age of 18 or before, and 99% of those started before the age of 26. So even if they did wait till they were 18, when the law was 18 to start smoking, there's still a large majority that start before they graduate college. So it's definitely applicable. More than one third of adults who have ever smoked started before the age of 14. So this also shows how young. I think this statistic is probably going to continue to increase, especially as we start including more vaping products with those higher concentrations of nicotine. It's going to increase the age or decrease the age that youth have started. And then 80% of adult smokers who are nicotine dependent report that they started smoking before they were 18. So there's a few different studies that are, but it's a large percentage of them started before they were of legal age to even use the products. So the most recent Indiana Youth Tobacco Survey the State Department of Health does was done a little bit about 2 years ago. So it's normally done in the spring or the fall of 22. So it would have been a year and a half ago. So this is all going to be high school, some middle school. The data that falls off for middle school just means that they didn't have enough statistical representation to actually share that data on this kind of level. But the shift I've seen in this over the years is the reason. Currently, it's very high for feeling anxious, stressed, and depressed. This didn't used to be the highest reason for it. It used to be because they thought it was cool or because a parent or a friend did it, kind of thing. And now it's being used more, it sounds like, as a coping mechanism for mental illness or mental health issues. Um, to get high or a buzz, that's large. This one will come into play when I start talking about alternative products that aren't ones that are smoked or vaped, because there's a few videos I'm going to share that apparently the college trend is to get a buzz off of nicotine. And it's very interesting to go down that rabbit hole. I have some TikTok videos I'll share a little bit later. Friend used them. They thought it would go unnoticed. So that's the other thing. Traditional combustible products always have been, you can smell it a mile away. Growing up doing this work, I could at some point tell you exactly what brand of cigarette somebody was smoking based on the smell. People thought I was nuts for that, but I'm like, when you grow up around smokers historically and then work in this field, and honestly, when I turned 21, bars were still smoking, so you can kind of notice what brands are. But with the vaping products, there's so many flavors that the smell isn't the same. It's not going to just smell like a traditional musty tobacco smell. Some of them are fruity. The reason a lot of schools got away with it is because middle and high school girls especially love the body sprays and the floral fragrances, the fruity fragrances. So it wasn't uncommon to smell that kind of stuff walking down a high school hallway at all. So it really goes unnoticed a lot more than it used to. Friends using them, still that peer pressure, that peer influence there. The availability of flavors, again, traditional combustible products outside of chewing tobacco and flavored cigars, there really wasn't any other flavors allowed in other than mint and menthol for traditional tobacco products. They can do tricks with them. I still remember a story that my neighbor had when her son was, he's graduated high school now, but he was like a eighth grader or ninth grader, and she happened to find a vape in his closet when she was cleaning out his room. Because if you have boys or will have teenage boys, that's the end all be all of everything. It just gets shoved in the closet or under the bed. And she's like, I know you know about these things. Like, what is this? And I explained some things to her, asked her how to approach it with him. And his comeback was he just wanted to do like smoke tricks because all the kids were doing smoke rings. And this seemed like the easy way to do that because it creates that cloud. So it's definitely, they didn't think about the nicotine impact, the fact that it contained chemicals that could hurt you. They just knew it was something that they could do fun tricks with. Family members, there's still that social influence and historical, especially this part of the country. Other areas of the country, you guys might notice there will be a lot of students probably coming to campus from parts of the country where they've grown up and never actually been around anyone who smoked or vaped or done anything. So they have no idea what these things are. So their influence is going to be probably greater because it's college and they'll be experimenting and maybe other people are using them. Whereas here in what we call tobacco country or the tobacco nation, where a lot of tobacco is still grown, it's ingrained historically, generationally through families, and the use is generational. You'll end up seeing, oh, well, my parents have done it, my grandparents have done it, they lived forever. It's not like anything, and that's just kind of what you do. Or again, stress, anxiety, depression. How are your parents coping with that? They may have been using a tobacco product. So that's their example of how to deal with those emotions. Um, so that's that influence with family members. Lesser end is, using it to try to quit other tobacco products. The cost is less, which we know in some cases some of these devices are pretty fancy. So e-cigarette use is a little bit pricier, but disposable income now is a little bit more. I find a lot of youth tend to have more disposable income than they used to have, depending on the area you live in. Some of them may have more or less, depending on their family affluence. Easier to get. Some places it's easier to get than others. I hear oftentimes stories, especially from other states, where their youth inspectors are allowed to carry ID. That they, as long as they show an ID, the clerk will still sell to them. They'll even tell the youth, "Oh, you're not of age yet, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and sell it to you anyway," and they will override it right in front of them and sell it to them, and then turn around and get violated. But in Indiana, we don't carry ID for our youth inspectors, so if they don't produce an ID, a lot of times that's a no go for a sale. But we still have a lot of retailers who just go ahead and sell anyway. Some other reasons they're curious. There's multitude. I know the next iteration of the survey is going to be issued in the fall, so hopefully by summer of next year we'll have the results of that one. And I know they're looking at kind of digging into a few of these categories a little bit more, so we might hear a little bit more about some of the reasons youth are currently using. Something new they've added because of the high levels of stress and anxiety being a reason of using is adding a metric for psychological distress. This just kind of explains the instructions around psychological stress and what they're asked. So, feeling little interest, feeling down, feeling nervous, anxious, on edge, or not being able to stop about worrying kind of gauges those levels. And this will show between the comparison of psychological distress versus if they currently use or a tobacco product or an e-cigarette. The level of psychological distress increases. Um, so does the use of tobacco product. So it's definitely higher. Combustibles seem to still be a little bit ahead, especially with those who have higher psychological distress, but vaping's right there next to it. It's not far behind. And then also questions in the survey include marijuana. It used to just be marijuana or THC, and they broke it out in this last survey. So between middle and high school, they break it down into the concentrates versus CBD versus the synthetic, which technically would be like the Delta, and then the Delta 8 products. So it kind of breaks it down. And that's if the youth recognize that there's a difference. In some cases, they might not be aware. I know, at least on the tobacco side, for nicotine, unless the retailer was very adamant about this is a non-nicotine, a non-tobacco derived nicotine. They aren't really, it just says non-nicotine contain or non-tobacco containing product, even though it contains nicotine. So same thing with synthetic marijuana. It's going to be that it contains THC, and unless you know what type of THC or what to look for, it's probably not going to be readily distinguished on what type. But we do see highly, especially in high school students, there is a large increase in vaping other substances, especially THC, marijuana. Um, and then in Indiana, I think it's the CBD oils and the Delta products are kind of synonymous. And I think that might go to, especially in 2022, when those products really started taking off just before then, and everybody was selling CBD as health and wellness. And Delta 8 kind of fits in that health and wellness because it's not regulated in the state of Indiana. So you don't have to be a tobacco retailer to sell these products. It could be the corner gas station, or it could be the wellness vitamin shop. It could be really anybody selling those products, and there's really hard to distinguish between them. And then with the 0.03% THC for CBD, it could say it contains THC, but it's below the levels. So then is it considered CBD? And there's just a lot of confusion that I don't expect youth to understand. I'm still trying to figure it out, especially because the products aren't as straightforward and honest as they should be when it comes to marketing and packaging. And this compares current use of marijuana among those using to using tobacco. So yeah, the one on the right is definitely alarming. So current use of e-cigarettes, current use of regular cigarettes, and current use of cigars. Out of the 8.7% using marijuana, that's high. It's over half. It's actually three quarters or more in some cases are dual using. They're using tobacco as well as marijuana. So I think it's a pretty good indicator that most of the time, the youth, at least who on this survey reported using marijuana, are going to be dual users. There's going to be very few that are just strictly using a marijuana product. So this is going to be data from the last Indiana college use survey. So this was the one that was done last year, that I pulled out. So this is past month use overall, and this is for the full state. So if y'all took the ICSIS, you have your own campus data. So I know that you'll have your own breakdowns for this, but this is for the state. Marijuana use is very high. I will say the ICSIS does not differentiate when it says electronic vapor products on whether it's nicotine or THC. It just says vapor products. So if they're using a vape of any kind, regardless of substance, that there were at least 21% of college age that reported that. And I
And
think
maybe
it's, yeah,
change that question.
that's one that I've wanted to. I know when they were emerging, like the vapor products were kind of emerging, they just added it in and didn't really clarify. So that's something that definitely need to look into um, in the future with defining what substance is being vaped. And then it decreases with cigarettes, cigars, chewing tobacco, and then the last one is smoking with a hookah or a water pipe, which I still think that one's really low because I think most of them are smoking marijuana with a hookah or water pipe instead of, because we don't really have a whole lot of hookah lounges. I know there might be a few in the state, but not a whole lot. And this is past use by age, broken down to under 21 versus over 21. So the blue line is those under 21, which is almost as high as those over 21, which again shows that a lot of them aren't waiting until they're of age to utilize these products. They're going ahead and starting them earlier, and may have even entered college using as well. And then this one does break down a little bit by flavor. So percentage of students reporting use of vapor products for specific substance. Wow, I just realized I spelled flavoring wrong when I did that. My bad. I had to create these graphs on the data, so I was like, oops, I'll correct that one. But nicotine's still high. It's almost exactly the same for under and over, which again shows that a lot of them probably started because this one was conducted in 23. The age increased in what, 20? So that was that kind of blurry age group of youth who were like, oh, I either just turned 18 and the law changed, or right around that, um, or just before it. And so they were already addicted to nicotine or thought about using the product or trying it prior to. Marijuana and THC is slightly lower, but not a whole lot, which again indicates that there are probably a lot of dual use going on. Flavoring only, there's not a whole lot of products out there that are zero nicotine or zero THC. So this one is typically used maybe by folks who are actually trying to quit altogether. They might be stepping down, so flavoring only, or there could be the misperception that they are vaping flavoring only when really it's not flavoring only. Again, especially when you get into the marijuana CBD realm, it's a little more difficult to find out what's exactly in the product or how honest they're being with packaging. So there could be something in it. And then alcohol. I still remember when these products came out and we had a large group of people just putting alcohol in vape products and smoking it. I was like, okay, I sure. I don't know how that makes anyone feel. I've never actually spoke to somebody who's vaped alcohol, but that would be an interesting one to find out kind of what their thoughts are were behind that.
The alcohol, at least from what I've researched and heard, that, it bypasses your digestive system so you don't vomit because you've had too much to drink, and the alcohol goes right into your cardiovascular system, so you get the feeling of being drunk without consuming all the liquid.
Yeah, and that part makes sense, but I would want to know how it tastes and how it feels inhaling burning alcohol. Like I don't know. That was I was like I kind of want to know what that experience is. But it's still interesting that there's almost 7% of those under 21 who have experienced that or tried. So next I'm going to talk are there any questions about the data before I move on? I'm going to talk about some the products specifically, and then later I'll go into some of the regulations, laws, and things like that. Okay. So this is where the fun thing is. I change this slide all the time. Every time FDA issues a new like, hey, this is a violation or these need to be pulled off the market, I update a new one. Um, I always leave the hoodie or the watch a lot of times on here because those still baffle me. Even though they were cited by FDA, they are no longer allowed to be sold per FDA regulation. Now, does that mean they're not still out there? No. When FDA cited those products, I noticed heavily discounted ones on the market because they were trying to get rid of inventory as quickly as possible, um, and still make money off of what they had manufactured, which again makes it more reasonable for use to get a hold of. I don't have an image of the watch on here. I took that one off, but I do know some high school students who have actually purchased watches. School resource officers ended up confiscating them, um, which just looks like an Apple Watch, and the whole thing comes out of like the case, the wrist watch case, and you just hit it and put it back in, and no one's the wiser. Um, the Soren products, the drop in the air, when I was doing more in person presentations, these were probably the most common ones I saw being confiscated in high school because they're smaller, they're more compact. The air is like a business card size, it's thin, they're refillable, so it's not like a disposable that's popular now. The Aqua Bar down at the bottom is a disposable. Those became popular when FDA came out with the regulations around flavoring, um, and flavor bans and things like that. They allowed for disposables, but and some of the refillable products, but not the pod based. So like Jewel had the pods that you just bought the little cartridge and stuck it on and pulled it off. Those were the ones that flavoring was not allowed in. At that point in time, disposables weren't really on the market as much. So that's when those took off because they were like, oh, here's how we circumvent that. We just make it not refillable and you can just smoke it, vape it, whatever, and toss it away when it's done. The one next to you, the disposable, is actually a fidget spinner. You put your fingers in the little spinny thing in the middle and the whole device spins. We all know when those were popular. So it's just something that, if they think it's just a fidget tool at school, they're not going to notice it as much. No one's going to notice that one either. They come in different. So the ones next to that are also refillable. They're similar to the Soren. The mouthpiece comes off, and the refillable cartridge is actually enclosed in the outer shell there. Um, they make them as weird as the gaming device. That's the battery. No, I don't think you can play a game on it, but that's what they look like. I've seen some as coffee cups, gaming controllers, things like that. Like you name it, and they've probably made it into a vape device. The IQ at the bottom looks like the old school iPod Nanos, but it's not. If you look on the right hand side where there's the little darker spot, you pull on that, and that pulls the refillable tank out of the inside of the device. Um, and then Elf Bar is another one that's popular. This one I see a lot just out and about in general. Um, and due to FDA regulations, you may not see it labeled as Elf Bar. It may be called EB Brands. It may be called something else because every time they get a marketing denial order from FDA, they go back and go underneath a new company or a new whatever and refile so they can keep these types of products on the market. longer without having to pull them and get in trouble for having a non-authorized product on the market. So it's really weird to see how they've circumvented it. They'll change just the packaging and what brand it's under so they can try to keep selling the products without having FDA say that you have to be pulled. And then the pencil case I just have there to see how easy it is to hide. The leopard print on top is actually a vape pen. The leopard print on the bottom is an actual writing pen. So they're easily concealed in kind of everything, everyday use. I have found, particularly more on the college campus side, because there's so many people of age, you'll see it more common walking around. It's not going to be something they're going to try to conceal as much because they're adults and they're just it's all the way around. It's just something that happens more frequently. And then other tobacco products that are on the market. So the ICOS is the heated product. So there's a whole nother group of products that are called heat not burn. And the heat sticks look like a cigarette. They're also called plugs. And they go in the device, the stick to the left, which has a heating element in it that heats up the tobacco inside the heat stick. And you inhale, and that's how, and the case on the right is what charges it. So you can stick it down in there and it charges like a battery pack. Um, this was interesting because they're sold in the US in multiple states now. It used to just be a few. I will say a lot of states or a lot of communities that sell these, even if you do order them online, they do require you to come and pick it up in person and show ID. It's not something, but this is also made by a large tobacco manufacturer. So they know the game, they know what's coming up. So they put a lot of restrictions in place. I haven't heard a whole lot about youth using these, but they're normally for sale in higher metropolitan areas. So I know when they first came to the US, they were on the East Coast in quite a few areas. It wouldn't surprise me if they're sold in like Chicago, New York, like large cities, larger than Indianapolis. I know we have a decently sized city, but if you're located near the Chicago area, there is a chance that there's probably retailers that have these. Um, Another trend that picked up was the toothpicks laced with nicotine. Zip Picks was actually cited by FDA because they didn't have any age restriction, anything on their website. So they updated that. So now it says you have to be 21 to purchase, and they have age restriction things now. Um, but as you imagine, these are very easy to conceal. They're just toothpicks laced with nicotine and flavoring that you just stick in your mouth. Um, and that little tube, I think of like 20 is like $8, $6 to $8. It's not very expensive at all. And it's 2 milligrams of nicotine per stick. And most cigarettes only have 1 milligram of nicotine per cigarette. So, in comparison, like two cigarettes and one little toothpick. So, other companies have done things similar. So, Camel did like the sticks, which look like toothpicks, but they're not. Those are not like actual sticks lace. They've created something that kind of dissolves a little bit more. Orbs are like breath mint style, and strips are like Listerine strips. The ones on the top were when Camel first came out with those, which was, oh gosh, back in the early 2000s. Because I remember when these hit the market, Indiana was actually a test state for them. We had quite a few states asking tobacco control folks in Indiana, like, what are these? What do they look like? Can you send us some? We couldn't mail them, but it was one of those that we went to conferences and would take them and be like, hey, like, this is what these look like. Eventually, they came off the market. They weren't super popular. They actually tasted disgusting. I knew a few friends who were smokers who tried them, and they were like, I would rather use the dip because at least I know what that does. Like, this is like taking that and magnifying it, and then it dissolves, and then it's all over your mouth, and it's gross. So yeah, they really didn't take off at first. I know they've been coming slowly back on the market in different ways, but I think technology has changed, especially with the vaping industry, on how the flavors can be maximized and the tobacco flavor can be minimized. The bottom is pouches, snus or tobacco pouches. These have been around for a while. A lot of people obviously didn't like chew floating around in their mouth. So what they do? They stuck it in a little pouch so it's more confined and stuck it in your lip. Um, so it kept it kind of more confined than being loose leaf chewing tobacco. And then Arriva is another product that's actually created by the tobacco industry. I've seen these at like checkout counters at gas stations, um, because it's advertised as a tobacco lozenge, and it's the same kind of feel marketing wise as a nicotine replacement therapy that has FDA approval, when this product does not have FDA approval for being a nicotine replacement therapy. So they wanted to capitalize on that. And they're like, okay, we'll come out with a product that's similar to that. You won't find those in pharmacies. Like I said, you'll find them mostly at tobacco retailers, um, advertising them as, a lozenge, or a gum in some cases to get, uh, to be like, hey, we're going to make money off of your thought of wanting to quit, even though it's a product that's not regulated or authorized by FDA to treat someone who is got a nicotine use disorder who is looking to come off of that. Um, so this is a few. The Zen at the top, the Velo ones. I'm going to go into those a little bit more here in a second. So these are the synthetic nicotine products. So these came out, and if you cut them open, it's like a white powder inside. Whereas if you cut the snus pouches out, it's literally like just loose leaf tobacco, like chewing tobacco that comes out. So that's the difference. The synthetic nicotine is lab created. It doesn't look like regular tobacco. But because of that, it gives you a different feeling, and they can have it in different concentrations. Most of them come in 3 milligram or 6 milligrams per pouch. Um, the TikTok videos are funny. I'm gonna so Zen is a whole like Zen culture. So on the right hand side, there is a list of different slang words that are used. There's actually a TikToker who comes up with a lot of these. And if any of you have ever seen the show Letterkenny, that's what he reminds me of. He reminds me of the gym guys, the guys in the gym, bro dudes, like that kind of language, and how he talks is that way. But Zenachino, Zen Latte, Zimbabwe. If you do hashtag Zimbabwe on any social media, it's going to come up with something related to these products. It's weird. Um, I've heard there's a lot of the social media videos talk about lip pillows or upper deckies. Upper deckies is another term they use because they stick them in the top lip, whereas most chewing tobacco, they've always used to put it in the bottom because loose leaf tobacco, it starts to migrate. So they always put, chewing tobacco was always synonymous with being in your lower lip. So they stick these up in the upper lip, which is so weird. Um, the TikToker who came up with a lot of these also came out with his own pouches. Now, these are caffeine pouches, and they are called upper deckies, and they have 50 milligrams of caffeine in them. But that also means there's more confusion on the market. If there are all of these products that look very similar to these nicotine pouches that contain caffeine that are legal to be sold, what's to say there's not going to be confusion, especially among clerks? If there's somebody that's selling a product that's legal versus illegal, because to me, the juice head, other than the warning label saying that it's nicotine, if those didn't have it as prominent, or if it was on like the backside of the product, I wouldn't know the difference between that or the other unless I was actively looking. They have some that are considered quote unquote all natural. So no, a lot of the energy drinks have some of these more natural caffeine containing vitamins and minerals. And a lot of these pouches contain a lot of those as well. So On is another one. Rogue is one. Zen tends to be the most popular. Now, again, because I shared my screen on this one, I don't know if I shared audio, so I'm going to click play on this first one. Please let me know if you cannot hear it.
There's no sound, but I don't know if there's supposed to be sound in that one.
Okay, so that one, oh, where am I? So that one's just, it's got music playing. I just wanted to make sure if you could hear it or not. But that's a Zen latte, or a Zen chino. They've actually just been putting the Zen pouches in their coffee. There's some where it's a Keurig cup and they sit it on top of the K cup as they put it in. I was at a conference and the Truth Initiative folks were talking about this. And I was like, this is crazy. I can't believe this. And people were like, well, why would you do that? But if you think about it, if we know that smoking and drinking coffee is something that people do, and smoking and drinking alcohol is something they do. They associate the feeling of having nicotine in their system and caffeine, or nicotine and alcohol together. So while people might think it tastes gross, or it may not be, is something they do, but if you think about it in the sense that it's something that someone who already used even traditional tobacco products did, then it does make sense. So if they were using chewing tobacco and drinking coffee, that flavor palette's still there. Um, Another trend with these is putting them in the freezer, especially specifically the wintergreen ones, because it enhances that cooling effect. Um, I'm going to stop sharing real quick and see if I can switch. There we go. Can you guys hear me
Yes, we
now?
can. Now you were frozen for a second.
Okay, this is weird. Got it. So there's apparently I have to click unmute on my screen sharing thing when I go to share the audio for this, because it automatically mutes me when I share my computer audio. Interesting. Okay. We'll figure this out. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to share this other one. This one is interesting because this one is someone talking about why he started using Zen and then why he stopped and how he felt afterwards. I think this one's a really interesting one because it speaks to kind of how this became a trend and so popular.
The problem with Zen is the impact that it has on the brain.
You know what's funny? I started taking Zins like a month ago because I saw Andrew Huberman talk about how nicotine is a cognitive function like supplement. And you know me, I love my cognitive function shit. I decided to take it. When I tell you, I have never seen something that's like I considered a tool turn into an addiction so fucking fast. It went from me just taking it to trade to me taking it to trade and then to do a YouTube video. And then for me to do trading, YouTube video, and then just going to the gym. And then it was like I constantly had to have one in my mouth. And now, over the past 3 days, I've gone completely sober off of all like substances. So alcohol, weed, nicotine, all that. Literally after the first day, motivation through the roof, energy through the roof, happiness about basic things through the fucking roof. This is your sign to stop, boys.
So yeah, that one when I saw it, I was like, "Hey, so they're thinking that it's supposed to enhance something and make them feel better about their performance." And for him saying using it to go to the gym, that's where the energy of this TikToker comes in. And if you know Letterkenny at all and the dudes in the gym, this is exactly what it is. They think they're going to do things to enhance their performance and to make things better, but in reality, it's really not helping them at all. And so when I saw that one, I was like, "That's great." Um, yeah, it's a hot mess. There's some, if you ever get on TikTok and just search Zenchino is what they're calling them now. Like, it's not Zen. You're not doing a Zen pouch or a pouch. They're either called a lip pillow or a Zenchino. It's really weird. I've never heard it called that before. In order for me to find the coffee video, I had to type in Zen latte in order to find it. Um, it's just crazy the amount of what they're doing. There are some videos of where they've college, and this is college age, have decorated their entire Christmas trees with Zen containers, tins, like all over the place. I saw one the other day where it was a girl saying, "Oh, does your man use these things?" and shows the Zen product, and was like, "Did you know there's a QR code on the back, and if you scan it, it's their reward system, so you can get, like telling the girlfriends to just scan all of these cans that their boyfriends are leaving around." and get the rewards points for it so they can get free stuff. It reminds me of back in the day, the Camel pack. You keep the inserts and send things in, or Marlboro, and you get the sweatshirts and the devices and all of that. Similar type reward system. I also saw some videos where one I saw was my baby's new favorite toy, and it was a kid in a bouncer playing with what I'm assuming was empty, but it was still a tin, a Zen tin, and was putting it in their mouth. And I'm like, the residue is all over that. Okay. There was one where the dog was chewing on it. I'm like, okay. But yes, it's crazy the amount. And a lot of these videos, in my opinion, look like college age. They're either dorm room settings, or it's a bunch of them together in like a frat house. It very much screams college age to me. So if you really go down that rabbit hole, YouTube isn't the best because you'll see some of the reels and TikToks, but it's not to this level. Um, it's just the ones that other people have shared, or if they have, you know, other platforms. Another thing that took this off was so Tucker Carlson did an interview with a podcaster, um, and he was talking about how these are like the next best thing, and he loves them. So even if it is someone who's following, CNN and the news media and government and all of that, he was like all on board with these. So that's another thing. People are using some of the celebrities that are using them. There's a lot of videos of military folks. There's one that I saw multiple times shared of a paratrooper. He's actually in the air with a parachute, videoing himself sticking Zen pouches in his lip. And I'm like, okay. And we know historically we've been able to get a lot of nicotine products out of the military because we know it's not going to help their performance. But then you have these products coming in that are becoming more and more popular. So it's just some of these older trends that happened with traditional cigarettes kind of coming back around with these pouches. They are supposedly regulated now since FDA put them under their jurisdiction to oversee synthetic nicotine products as well. We can in Indiana now inspect for these products because they changed that law July 1st of last year to include synthetic products in excise's inspections. So now they can inspect for underage sales of these, which is fantastic. But this is definitely a problematic thing and something you will more than likely see on your campuses than probably even more so than vaping if you really start noticing. If you look for the lip having something tucked in their lip, it's easier to see the cloud of vape most of the time. But if you teach or in a classroom setting, I'm sure you'll probably notice more of these as well. So that's what I had with emerging products. Before I moved on to some of the laws and how to report violations and things, I wanted to see if there was any questions or any products that you guys have noticed that I didn't mention, because I obviously can only keep up with so many of these. No? Okay. And because of the time constraint, I did not go into great detail in this, but if y'all have questions, I know I have a whole presentation. I could go on an hour about how the FDA regulation timeline and all of that. I'm not going into that, but it's there. If you guys have questions about any of that, I'm more than happy to do a separate presentation or talk to you guys offline about it. But in Indiana, as we all know, it is illegal to sell a product to someone who is under the age of 21. It's considered a Class C infraction. These are the penalties that the retailer can receive for selling. I will let you know that this is problematic and you'll see a little bit more why. But just to give you an idea, we have 7,732 tobacco retailers in the state of Indiana. Last year, we only inspected about 3,660 of those, which is around 47%, so not even half. And when you look at the violations, they only increase based on violations you've had in the past 12 months. And if the next time that the retailers that were inspected in 23 don't get inspected until 25, then that year has lapsed and they're back to starting over again. So this is something I've wanted to, it makes sense on paper, but in reality, excise can't get to every retailer in a year. And because of that, unfortunately, the fines don't increase. The fines on the FDA side are more. So they do have fines there. They are a little bit higher, but they don't talk to each other. So if an FDA inspection happened, and then they have an excise inspection, if they don't take into consideration that they violated for FDA, they only go off of state inspections. So most of them have either a waiver if they haven't had a violation in the last year. Um, I know it says 0 previous citations, is they can fine up to $400. If you look at the excise website for their docket of who's been violated, a lot of times it's around $250 to $300. I don't see them go up to that 400 unless it's someone who historically has had violations, but it fell. So say 3 years ago was their last inspection and they had a violation, so it wouldn't fall in this increase. They might charge the maximum of 400 for them. It just depends. So it's really up to the excise prosecutor on that end on how the charges are done. So. And then I will breeze over this since we're getting closer on time. So this is just a background of the SINAR amendment. That's the other part of my job. I know I fund you guys, but the SINAR part of my title here at DMHA is the monitoring of underage sales. So states are required to do that based on an amendment from 1992. Mike SINAR is an Oklahoma congressman who brought that forth to require the age to be 18 back in that time. This just goes over kind of the requirements that we have to make sure that we have a law, we enforce that law, and that our retailer violation rate does not go over 20%, or we could lose no more than 20% of our block grant. That was actually changed. It's decreased to a 10% now. So we can lose up to 10%. 20% was a lot of our block. That was millions, like multiple millions of dollars. Now 10% is like a little over $1 million, but that's stuff directly funding you guys. That's, if you think 20% is the whole budget we get for prevention, and now half of our budget for prevention would go away. That's kind of how I explain it. If we violate. Now we can do a corrective action plan as well. We've never been close. The closest we've been was 17%, and that was the year before I started with DMHA. We are currently at 11.8. This kind of shows historically across the board. The dotted line is the one that I find most important. When excise was funded really well and had a lot of officers, they were averaging around 8 to 900 inspections per month, which means they were getting to all of the retailers in a year, and some of them multiple times. And that's why our retailer violation rate was under 10%. You can see we were getting there in 2019, and then COVID happened and things shifted. We tanked. I know it said we only did 232 average on a month, but we went for 6 months in 2020 without doing inspections because of COVID. So honestly, I was surprised that we only went from 14 to 15, 14.5% to 15. There were some states that are well over 20% right now. They actually stopped inspections for a year and a half to 2 years in some states. They're just now getting started again. And then some states, SINAR requirement is actually their only enforcement mechanism. The inspections done for SINAR are the only inspections done in their state, because some states don't have FDA contracts, some don't have a state excise office. A lot of states actually don't have tobacco licensing. Indiana's lucky enough that we actually know we're required by law to have all of our retailers licensed. We have to know who they are, so we know where they're at. Kentucky, for example, does not have a licensing requirement. So my counterpart there is then stuck with the federal list and the Department of Revenue list when it comes to taxes on trying to figure out where these retailers are located. They do a decent job of it, but again, rural Kentucky, there could be a pop-up store that all of a sudden starts selling and they have no idea, and they wouldn't know unless they go in and find out, because there's no requirement for them to report that. If you guys are interested in knowing what retailers are around you, I do have a mapping tool on the DMHA website. It includes inspections dating back all the way to 2017. It includes their most recent pass-fail inspections. If they passed their most recent inspections, it's green. If they recently passed, that means they passed their most recent inspection, but had failed the one previous to that. And it also includes, and this includes FDA data. So say they failed an FDA inspection and then their next inspection happened to be state excise, they would move to that recently passed because they did. And then there is an Excel file at the bottom of that. So if you guys want to download it, or, just let me know. It's pages and pages long. Like I said, 7,000 retailers. And if you ever want to know, just let me know. I have it broke down by county as well. And there's a link there, and I update this map every single month when I get updated inspection data. The FDA data is a little bit lagged. A lot of times the actual date of the inspection is the date that that inspection result was finalized, because for FDA, they have to do the inspection and then that report goes to Washington, D.C. They look through the case and then violate the retailer. And until that violation has been solidified and that retailer has been fined, they don't consider it a completed inspection. So there's probably a few weeks, if not a month lag on some of the data there, but that's just because they don't want to say, hey, we violated, XYZ, and then they come back and appeal it or find out that it really wasn't the case. So there's a little bit of lag on the actual dates for the FDA inspection, which is fine. That's typically how those happen. And then if you guys notice any violations, I encourage you to report it not only to the state, but also the feds, because they both trigger inspections. And if somebody's violating and you only have one person do a follow-up, it's always nice to have two. So excise is broken down into districts. As you see here, that's what the map is. Those are the state excise districts. The cities listed are where their district office is located. Pretty easy. You go there, find your district. You can do it anonymously. You can include your information if you want to. You don't have to. Same with FDA. You can file a complaint if you, and it will trigger them to notify our contact here in Indiana, and they will send out an inspector to go do an inspection for underage. Now, if there's other violations as well, you can definitely file complaints for those, but that just triggers different kinds of inspections depending on what the complaint's for. This is the one though that I think will benefit you guys more on the FDA side. So this is a safety reporting portal, and it's typically used for like researchers and things like that to submit things through FDA, but healthcare providers, clinicians, and users of these products can also submit. Especially when it comes to if your counseling center is aware of folks who have had adverse effects or notice feeling different. So when a lot of the vaping products came out, I noticed some of my friends who had decided to switch from combustible to vaping products because that was the thing, um, felt like they got dizzy or lightheaded or had more headaches or had a chronic cough or things like that, or they had used a particular vape product for years and never had issues, and then all of a sudden something came up and it didn't feel right. I would encourage you to go to the safety portal. You can do this anonymously as well and submit those side effects and specifically what product and everything in it, because that way FDA will have record of knowing that there might be some kind of health impact associated with a particular product. Now, it could be even down to the batch of that product, and it could be just a fluke, especially, but over time we know these products change, they change composition, science changes. So letting FDA know if you are experiencing different side effects or something that doesn't seem normal, because that way they do have a record of it and they can take those into consideration when they're doing their reviews of these products to allow them on the market or determine their safety. Now, I did leave the right-hand side there because FDA does regulate a lot of other products as well. So it could be a regular prescription drug as well that you do. In animal supplements, animal food, they also go over those dietary supplements, vitamins, things like that. So you can also report those products. But a lot of people, I don't think, generally know that this exists. I've heard many people complain about having weird effects on things. And not knowing what to do. So they go to their doctor. And I can see you guys, clinics, they go to the clinic and find out, what do I do? But this is something else they can do, is contact FDA and make sure that they're aware that these products could have a non-known effect or impact on someone. That's all I have. This was a lot in an hour or 45 minutes. Like I said, I can typically go on forever about any of these topics. But let me know if you have any questions. The bill that Lisa talked about on the FDA side, so I'm sure most of you know, FDA released a list of like 22 or 23 products that are authorized through FDA. So they went through the pre-market authorization and passed. The bill that Lisa was talking about would include Indiana's registry of those products, and we would only allow products on that FDA list to be sold. So that's kind of why it's a big thing, because it would vastly limit the amount of products on the market in the state if that does pass. And a lot of states have been looking at this, so that's what's kind of included in that bill. The harder thing has been knowing what FDA has in application process and status before it gets approved or denied. So that's been the harder thing. They only list what's been approved. They don't share the list of what's been denied because, like I said, the EB brands, that those Elf Bar products have probably been denied a few different times, and they just rebrand and reapply. Um, so we'll see what happens. And right now, those products being regulated or that list being upheld is a federal thing. That would be up to FDA to enforce that. That's why we see so many products on the market currently, because they're just going after the manufacturers to stop producing the products that they denied, and not going after retailers at the moment. Any questions?
Well, just like with
Yeah.
alcohol, amazing how they come up with all these products, all new, all the time, new ways to use it. It just blows my mind.
Kathy, so what about menthol ban and FDA and the new menthol ban rules going after?
Okay, so you cut out and somebody went by with a really loud cart. I'm pretty sure your question was around menthol and the menthol ban with the FDA. Is that correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Sorry, it was just one of those. I'm like, I'm hard hearing and you're cutting in and out. Okay. So that one, I think it got sent for final determination with FDA to become a final rule. I don't think they've actually issued the final ruling on it yet, just yet. It looks promising, but again, even if it is a final rule, we aren't too sure how FDA is going to choose to enforce that. So we'll see. I have already seen a shift in products. So just like the vaping products, they name it for mint and menthol containing ones, they would say ice or cool or something along those lines instead of mint or menthol flavored. And if this goes into place, I've already seen some companies switching traditional combustible products to those kind of cooling or minty, like non distinguishable flavors that are very similar to that. The ruling does go into detail about specific chemicals that create that cooling effect or that minty flavoring. So they've also come up with drops you can put on cigarettes or combustible products, and like cards or packs you can slide down in the cellophane of the tobacco of the pack of cigarettes that will then like infuse them with a little bit of flavoring, but it's not being created with those flavors. Those are some workarounds that I know have already kind of come out for that, but I will definitely keep you guys posted once I hear more about what the final decision is on that.
Like I said, if these people would just use their powers for good, then we would be able to like eradicate hunger and the common cold. But I don't understand how these things, they slip by all the regulations. It's like with alcohol. Well, thank you. That was very informative. And I'm sure we all have noticed these on our campus or in our communities. And, like I said, they're unregulated in our state right now. The vaping products are. So hopefully the bill will go somewhere because we really need some handle. Now, oddly enough, the tobacco industry supports that bill because they want to control mostly what is allowed on the market since they're probably already selling it. So you often find strange allies at the state house when it comes to issues like this, people you don't usually agree with. So anyway, thank you so much, Kathy. And if you have any questions about her presentation, obviously this recording will be on the website, but we can also send out the PowerPoint if you would like it. We can post that on the website too. And just a quick reminder, our next call will be on February 23rd. So be looking for the reminder about that. And we don't have an agenda as of yet, but I hope to use these calls to be more of like a learning experience, not just us sharing information, but having topics of interest. So if there's anything that you have a burning interest to learn more about, or you want to talk about something that you think the rest of the group would benefit from, let me know and we'll add you to the agenda. So if anybody has anything else. Otherwise, we will see you all in February, and we'll make sure to get the PowerPoint from Kathy so we can also post that on the website. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay dry.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye.